In connection with this Urjavaran 2017, we have arranged 5 technical sessions, starting with the keynote address by the eminent architect Shankar, dealing with the green technology, importance of green technology in the area of whether it is passive cooling or active cooling concerned to a building. We have other sessions from experts dealing with the indoor air quality connected with hospitals, operation theaters, the indoor air quality connected with the buildings, and more connected with the main theme of Urjavaran, the energy conservation, like building automation systems, that is also included as part of this Urjavaran seminar. We have also arranged a motivation session for the members and the delegates of the session. So I think we'll start with the first keynote address dealing with the sustainability. In fact, this sustainability has gaining importance in today's time. That's why it is included in the engineering. Kerala Technological University has introduced this subject, sustainable engineering, as part of the first year. For the first year students, they have started sustainable engineering to show the importance of sustainable development. Any development which meets the needs of the present, and it should not affect the future generations to meet their needs. That's the concept of sustainable development. So even though ISHRAE, the Indian Society for Heating, Refrigeration, Air Conditioning Engineers, they are more inclined towards the mechanical refrigeration systems. Because of the societal commitment of ISHRAE, we also take up the energy conservation. To that extent, we may encourage the passive cooling system, as architects suggest, from the cheap materials available, even though it may affect as the business sector, but to the commitment to the society, the ISHRAE is also, that's the main reason for including the sessions from leading architects like Shankar. I take this opportunity to invite Shankar for the presentation on the sustainable cooling technologies for the buildings.
Thank you, organizers, for giving me this opportunity to talk to you. Dr. Ashok Kumar, who is moderating this session. I recognize the august presence of Sri Chandradattan, Padma Shri Awardee Sri Chandradattan, the President-elect of your national chapter, Sri Subramaniam, the President of Trivandrum chapter, Sri Unikrishnan, Sri Ashok Ayyappan, distinguished professionals in the audience like Gautam Baliga, Sri Arunachalam, Sri Krishnaswamy sir, and the rest of them. Once again, thank you very much for the opportunity given. As I was coming to this venue, I was thinking about a thing that happened probably a few decades back when I was still a student. The first day in my engineering college, Trivandrum, Dr. Ashok Kumar's engineering college, I lost my father. And I was in a dilemma because I belonged to a middle-class family. Suddenly, the income earner had gone, and a lot of people in the family were trying to give me options for livelihoods and things like that. And one of them, who was actually working in Kuwait, gave me an option to go for a short-term course in refrigeration and air conditioning. Because those days, when I was studying, I was doing my engineering, air conditioning and refrigeration was an income earner, in the sense it would lead you to opportunities. It was easy to get a job as an air conditioning mechanic probably elsewhere in the Middle East. But my mother stood her down, and he said, whatever be the difficulties, whatever be the financial restraints, you should opt for engineering, not a diploma in short term. It was not even a diploma, a certificate course 6-month certificate course in air conditioning and refrigeration. And that's why I didn't become an air conditioning professional Instead, I became an architect. Having said that, I will take up from where Sri Chandradatt and Sri Subramanian left. Sri Subramanian actually in his inaugural remarks about the organization, he was talking about ICE, inspiration, inspire, customize, and energize. I think that is going to be one of the thrust areas of the organization in the years to come. Well said. I hope the organization will really take up from these premises and get onto a nice sustainable work plan. And most important, Sri Chandradatt actually was talking about sustainability. I was just wondering why I'm here, because all my life, I've been actually talking against, let me tell you that, artificial air conditioning and artificial refrigeration, especially in countries, tropical countries like India, places like Kerala, locations like Trivandrum, where the climate is so conducive, so good, so that, I mean, in most of the cases, we could avoid artificial lighting and artificial air conditioning and artificial refrigeration and things like that. Just wondering if we could actually open these doors. We have bright sun outside. It's not a cloudy day. It's a very bright day, radiant day outside, and we could have, switched off all the lights, and we could have saved so much of energy in that. We have nice winds. Kerala is located in such a nice location where lots of things need to be looked at. When I studied architecture a few decades back, one of the basic definitions of architecture as taught was about conditioning of spaces. We said, I mean, the basic definition of architecture actually goes like this. It's conditioning of space. Conditioning of space for human comfort is the basic definition of architecture. So architecture all along had been talking about spaces. Why we are here today as a part of this national flagship seminar, Urjavaran, is because this space that we are talking about, the comfortable zones that we are talking about, is slowly getting vitiated, slowly getting diluted, slowly getting violated. That is why we are all here. We are concerned about that. And on top of that, there's a development agenda before us. We are going to talk about emerging cities. That's a huge promise, When you really look at it, you talk about smart cities, and I should share this happiness that I was one of the key members of the Smart City Mission in Trivandrum, which got its position now in the national calendar. Having said that, emerging cities, when you talk about emerging cities, you should also look at a completely diverse paradigm. When I talk about that diverse paradigm, I'm talking about an agenda that is actually before us. What we call not as a green agenda, we actually call it as a brown agenda. You see, we talk about emerging thing. It's all about hope. It's all about, nurturing a dream. But what is the reality? What is the social reality around us? There is still poverty around us. There's still poverty. Poverty on one side, ecology, environment on the other side, and we all want development to happen on the third side. The basic challenge before us, every one of us, delegates, distinguished guests, is to create bridges, to build bridges between seemingly different phenomena. When I said phenomena, I talk about poverty, I talk about environment and development. Can we synchronize these kind of things? I mean, can we build meaningful bridges? Let me tell you, the meaningful bridges between poverty, between environment and development, between poverty and development is the key issue, especially for professionals like us, especially for the professionals in the third world. When I say poverty, you might all frown at this thing. You will say that poverty to us is a very negative phenomenon. Let me say that. We don't call, I am being an architect, being a social activist working in this environmental sector, we don't call slums slums. We call them differently. In Malayalam, we call them Cheri Pradesham and things like, which is actually very negative language positioning of the whole thing. Slums are favelas in South Americas. I mean, Central Americas and South America, they are called favelas. Favelas are not islands of despair and sadness. Favelas are islands of hope. Can slums be islands of hope? Can poverty be a positive phenomenon? I will say, they'll say, with such passion and compassion, let me say that. I will say that poverty can be a very positive phenomenon. Can poverty propel people forward? Me, being born in a very ordinary this thing, poverty is that particular family paradigm that propelled me forward to dream. Can poverty be a positive phenomenon? I will say yes. So can we synergize the energy? That's the whole thing. Can we synergize? Let us look at poverty not as a negative phenomenon, as a positive phenomenon that can actually propel a country, the whole generations to dream. So if we can synergize those kind of things, poverty as a positive phenomenon and linking it with the concerns that are linked to environment and development, then I think the future is ours. I said a very critical statement in the beginning. Our space is getting violated. When I say our space is getting violated, I'm talking about a climate change. Climate change, especially in the times, not in the times of cholera, but in the times of urbanization. We are talking about emerging cities on one side. The pace and intensity of urbanization that is happening all over the world, especially in the third world, is staggering. It's staggering. It goes beyond our comprehensions, and it really goes beyond our comprehension. The degree, let me underline the statement again. The pace and intensity of urbanization that is happening in the third world countries is sad. Sad because it's happening in places like sub-Saharan African republics. You must have heard of Somalia, you must have heard of Ethiopia, you must have heard of Eritrea. Sub-Saharan, these African republics are the poorest of the world. It's happening in Bangladesh, one of the poorest countries in the world. It's happening in some of the places in South America, whose name we hear only once in 4 years when the World Cup matches are on. Paraguay, Uruguay. These are the places, Argentina. These are the places where urbanization is now touching an impossible level of nearly 95%. When I say 95%, it means 95% of the population are already living in urban lands and urban. I mean, they depend on urban infrastructure. 95% of the population of a poor country having to sustain themselves, depending on the bad situations as far as infrastructure is concerned, is something that is really sad. I mean, this is something that we have to work around. And in this particular pretext, we have to talk about responsibility. I've actually spelled it a little different. Response and ability. How do you, see, I'm not sad for a moment. I'm always an optimist in the sense, all these situations are there. India is still rising. Still believe that India is rising. We will be able to harness the energies of development into positive forces. And thereby, this thing. I mean, every time I talk about sustainability, a lot of people, especially from the Western world, they come back to me and tell me that it's the consumption pattern that is ruining your country. I always say, no, it's not the consumption. We don't have enough to eat. We don't have enough resources. And we definitely look at resource efficiency. We look at all these things. But we have our own sciences. We have our own backgrounds to look back around. We will together, we will find out our ways out. And let us pledge together that we'll all march towards what we call as sustainability. How do you actually define appropriateness? It's a very dicey this thing. This is where I want to start the discussion from. I might talk for 30, 40 minutes and I might, some people might ask me questions and I'll leave. But at the end of the day, I really wish and pray. End of the day, I really wish and pray that it becomes a kind of conversation. Me putting my own, eccentric ideas before you. Some of it can be very provocative. Please react to that. And together, I always believe in this particular structure of discussions where I put in my ideas, you react to that, and together, can we go for a synthesis? Put my thesis, you put your antithesis, and together, can we look for a synthesis and go forward? How do you really define appropriateness? It's something that I want you to dwell on. Is it the cultural appropriateness? I believe that all the technology interventions, it has to be India-specific, it has to be Kerala-specific, and it has to be regional-specific. No doubt about that. It has to be very local. All the solutions, technology solutions that you are talking about, have to be local. When I say local, it has to be conducive, it is good to suit our local needs and local climate. And local, not only the physical climate, the local social climate and the cultural climate and things like that. Otherwise, your technology will not get far. So it has to be whatever technologies that you are talking about, whatever materials are talking about, whatever concern in sustainability are that it has to be culturally appropriate. It has to be, it has to touch the traditions. Because traditions, I believe. You look at the refrigeration, look at the air conditioning traditions that we had in terms of cooling of materials. We had a huge vernacular tradition of cooling all the materials. I don't have to dwell on that. Even cooling the buildings, we had such a beautiful vernacular vocabulary on materials and technologies pertaining to this particular subject. So it has to touch the tradition because tradition is, when you really look at it, it's basically, don't you think, it's a kind of science. It's to me, traditional knowledge is 1,000 years of research and development. You may not record it properly, but traditional knowledge, Naatarivugal as we call it, is 1,000 years of research and development. And no need to talk about third determinant. It has to be time specific, like it has to be region specific, it has to be a time specific too. And I'm just looking at my own background, looking at architecture, how beautifully this particular linkages, this particular connectivity has been kind of achieved in the olden days. The integral connection between man, nature, and habitat. How beautifully it was achieved. You see, before, everywhere we are cutting down trees, everywhere we are doing that thing. We are manipulating lands. We are cutting down trees, not only we are manipulating the land and things like that. That violation was not there when you really look at the traditional architecture part of it. If you had to cut down a tree, if you don't have any other choice but to cut down a tree, you always used to do a kind of vriksha puja. It was kind of saying sorry to the tree, and praying to the tree, offering prayers to the tree, and making a promise that I'm going to cut down the tree. And he says pardon to all the little organisms, living in that tree, including that. It's actually praying, say sorry to the tree, and as a compensatory thing, planting 10 more new trees. This was our traditional thing. This was our tradition, looking at all the determinants of architecture, looking at scale, dimension, proportion. We had our own scale of things. We had our own dimensioning of things. And we had our own, how site was very diligently handled is something that we have lost. Kerala, for instance, we have very distinct geographical regions, talking about plain lands, we're talking about hilly tracts up in the north, and talking about a very, very long coastal line. These geographical differences have been completely violated now. Everywhere we are making it into Maidans and have building buildings on Maidans, We believe, people who believe in organic architecture, we believe that a building should conform to the dictates of the land. It's very critical when you talk about sustainable development. Building should really confine, it should follow the contours of the land. When I say contours of the land, I remember the words of the great architect Frank Lloyd Wright, who said, building should not be on a mountain, building should be of a mountain. With that particular statement, that building should not be on a mountain, it should be off a mountain. We have a very beautiful example right here in Trivandrum, talking about the old Ashoka Hotel. Now it's Leela Hotel, Leela Ravi's Hotel in Kovalam. That's a building that really hugs the profile of the Kovalam Hills. That's a classical example of organic architecture. We really want to go back to that. Old traditional days, Malabar houses were very distinctly different from Travancore house, and Travancore houses were very different from the houses that were being built in the coastal line. Our architecture, our technologies, our vocabulary of technologies and materials, everything pertained to the geographical condition. That's what is being violated now. Look at the response to climate. It is very critical, response to climate. You see the Toda houses on your right, that hut following a parabolic shape. That's the traditional hut of Todas. Todas is an Adivasi group living in Nilgiris. And this particular shape of this particular hut out there, it is actually, when you really look at it, analyze the shape, look at the materials that have been used. It's all climate responsive. You look at it, how climate responsive. The bungas, those who have gone to Gujarat must have seen these bungas in Gujarat. Let me tell you, when I say climate responsive, when I say they are socially responsible, I say it with such conviction, because it is these bungas that actually withstood the onslaught of earthquake in Gujarat. When earthquake happened in Gujarat, every other old, big buildings collapsed. All those gimmicks collapsed. 14-storied, 15-storied building collapsed. But these bungas stood its ground, because it was not only climatically a very responsible building. You look at the shape of this thing. As you know, arch is a very stable form. Circular buildings, conical roof, these are all very stable structures when you really look at it. This is what I call as tradition. This is what I call as culture. And these bungas stood the onslaught, let me tell you, onslaught of earthquake that happened in Anjar and Bhuj in Gujarat a few years back. Next to that was a 14-storied building that collapsed like 9 pins. I had been involved in rehabilitation activities for a long time, and I was a witness to the whole drama. People look at architecture and say, wow, to certain buildings, Wow, there's a building just next door. If an earthquake ever happens in Trivandrum, that's the building that's going to fail. Which is the building that I'm talking about? Which is the building that I'm talking about? The Urjavaran building, right here in the Bakery Junction, Urjavaran building. Have you seen the shape of the building? It's the plinth area in the ground floor is much lesser than the plinth area in the top. People looking at the particular shape, it's like this, a shape of this building, will say, wow, it's a beautiful building, wow. They will express happiness by saying, wow. This wow feeling is extremely dangerous in disaster-prone areas. Let me tell you this. It's the wow elements that collapse first. You must have seen what happened on 9/11 in New York when the World Trade Center collapsed. You saw, I'm sure that image must be there in your mind. You saw a semblance of a plane getting into 82nd floor of World Trade Center. 82nd floor of 82nd. And nothing happened. You saw after some time, few seconds, you saw something falling off the camera could capture only that. You saw some debris falling off probably it was the debris of a plane. Nothing happened to the building. Nothing happened to the building. 17 minutes, smoke was billowing out. There was a lot of confusion. Smoke was billowing out, but nothing really happened to the building till the 17th minute. 17th minute, it started collapsing. And then it collapsed like 9 pins. In a minute, the whole building collapsed, and there was only a heap of debris there. The wow factors can create. I mean, in the apartment building that I saw next to these bungas in Gujarat, they had a cantilevered balcony on the 13th floor. Cantilever balconies, these are all, and let me share it with people who are living in apartments in Trivandrum. You build apartments on stilts. Stilt? Do you know what a stilt is? You build it on columns, and you have basement parking, ground floor parking, and then your apartment starts, isn't it? Most of the apartments, you have basement parking and ground floor parking. You have parking now. Very dangerous. Extremely dangerous in disaster situation. If one column fails, unless it is braced properly, unless you have some shear walls in between, I know these are all civil engineering vocabularies that I need to use it here. Because unless you have shear walls, unless you brace it, all this is going to fall like 9 pins. So disaster situations, nobody can help you if you do it like. This is where traditional knowledge and traditional architecture comes in. And look at the perforations, the penetrations, the screens that we had, looking at screening of excessive glare, and yet letting air to come in. So these traditional screens were all over the place. Looking at Agra, looking at Hyderabad, looking at Kerala. We had these perforations, penetrations, nice balconies. All our buildings were virtually insulated, having some design elements outside. Look at our own traditional roof. The traditional roof used to really come down 3.5 feet. It used to come down away from the walls. All our walls, all the old walls, tile roof and old walls, were naturally protected. And that is why when you go to an old house with Oda and things like that, people still say that the interiors are much more cooling, it's much more comfortable, much more cozy. And we would always want to run, instead of staying in concrete monstrosities, you want to run back to all these things. The traditional technology, traditional way of looking at climate, traditional way of cooling, traditional way of insulation. This is the knowledge base and it was all very simple, It was no complication about it. There was absolutely no, this technology was very simple, easy to replicate. The technology was so simple and so accessible. It was so inclusive. It was not an exclusive technology. It was so inclusive. Anybody could do it. So that was the beauty of our technologies and materials, again, which we have lost. I don't want to go into the rest of it. It's all about conservation. It's about reuse. Now we are talking endlessly about sustainability concern. We talk about endlessly about reusing material. It's all about recycling material. These were all there in position in traditional idioms. Let me tell you, all these things, reusing, you must have seen in old big mansions, manas, this thing. You used to have big water bodies, which really used to cool the interiors. We never talked about rainwater harvesting in those days, It was not, the terminology was not there. Rainwater harvesting was there in position. The roof water was actually harnessed, it was put to water. We never called it rainwater harvesting. Harvesting is a new technology, new terminology that it was all about recharging the Mother Earth. So look at the water resources, look at the energy resources, look at the material resources, the labor resources. We had our own concerns right in position. We had to get back to them. When I say appropriate these technologies, this again something that I would always fall back on. It has to be local. Everything will have to be local. It was our father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, who talked about this particular concern. Talking about economic sustainability, talking about all the kind of connectivities and linkages. He talked about sustainability in architecture way back in 1920s when he said, you build your house with the kind of materials that you get within 5 kilometers radius of the site. Look at it. He said, You have to build your house with whatever materials you get within 5 kilometers radius of the particular site. It talked about local materials. If you really want to talk about sustainability, if you really want to mean sustainability, it's easy to talk sustainability, but it's extremely difficult to mean sustainability. If you really want to mean sustainability, you will have to go local. You shouldn't use materials that are being brought from Rajasthan. You shouldn't use marbles. You shouldn't use granite. You shouldn't use that. Mandatory, no. Mandatory, no. Because it not only talks about an expensive material being carted away for thousands of kilometers, it talks about energy wastages in a very, very big way. It talks about petrol that carries these things. Heavy slabs of granite being carted away in heavy-duty lorries. It talks about it. So you have to not look at a material. I mean, you have to have this determinant. If you ask me to select a material, this is going to be extremely important. Energy efficiency of building is going to be a very critical determinant. It also talks about the eco-sensitivity. It talks about things that our local people could do. Let me tell you that. This is why I endlessly talk about mud structure, I endlessly talk about lime structure, because we have the technology. Kerala has the technology, and Kerala masons, I think, are the best in the world. Let me tell you that, because I'm working across the world. I'm working in Africa, I'm working in parts of Europe, I'm working across the country, different parts of the country. I should tell you with such pride that our masons know how to do buildings much better than any other masonry group in the world. So you have to use that expertise. When I say about mud construction, I talk about that expertise. I talk about the Kaivaralle Punyam Nori. They have such punyam on their fingertips. You have to recognize that. They have such artistry. They have such artistry in there. They know about the verticality and the horizontality of the construction, that which talks about the sustainability part of it. That's what I mean by local skills. And insulation is a very critical determinant. Whatever you say, I don't talk about air conditioning, I don't talk about refrigeration, but I always use mud because it's a very insulating material. It really, really brings down temperature to probably real cool interiors. Real cool interiors. My house, my office building, which is a 6-storied building in complete earth construction, 6-storied building. It's all very insulated. You come and feel these things. I don't want to talk about it. You feel it. The experiential coefficient of this particular technology is something that needs to be really felt, experienced. And I don't have to talk about energy efficiency. The same determinants. This is the determinant that I take as a person who is trying to not only propose sustainable architecture, but do sustainable architecture. Not about talking about sustainable, but doing sustainable architecture. This is a very critical thing, talking about local skills, energy efficiency. Why I take mud, why I take lime, is both because they are energy efficient materials. Why I call mud as an energy efficient material is something that the question that I expect from me. Why I call mud as an energy efficient material? Because it doesn't go through a process at all. It doesn't go through a process. Normally, it goes through a process and you make burn bricks. You burn Mother Earth and get these burn bricks. When I say mud, when I say stabilized mud blocks, it doesn't go through a process. It's only the human energy that goes into that. I get mud from my own background, I make it into a brick, and then I use it with such pleasure and festivity. So that is what, and obviously whenever we're talking about these kind of materials, sustainable material, it has to be cost efficient. This is one little problem I had with some of the national research institutions. In Trivandrum, NIST, earlier, Sir Unikra sir, they brought out a beautiful material, very beautiful brick made out of coconut pith as a infill material. Coconut pith is you could throw it, you could catch it, it was so light, it was so dimensionally very beautiful, so smooth. So these are the determinants for an architect to select a material. It was so, the sheen finish was there, It was so light, you could throw it to distances, you can catch it. It was so friendly, labor friendly, and dimensionally very stable. For an architect, it's very critical. Dimensionally very stable, equal, texture was uniform, color was uniform. But I couldn't put it to market. They came to me for promoting this material. I couldn't put it to market because cost was probably those days, it was almost 10 times the cost of ordinary bricks that you get from the market. Technologies have, unless it touches the cost efficiency part of it, I don't think you will be able to take it forward. And obviously, when I talk about sustainable material, one of the critical questions that I always face after 30 plus years of continuous professional practice, I still hear this. I just built my mud house in Trivandrum. The roof is in mud. No steel, no concrete, no cement. Even the roof is in mud. It's raining in Trivandrum. You have to come and see that. And people always talk about the durability and the life of the building. People always question the durability and the life of the building. My dear friends, I am a very good mason myself. Not only an architect, I built with my own hands. That is why I know about the versatility of the material. That is why I know about the strength of the material. That is why I know the plasticity of the material. That is why I know the versatility of the material. And that is why I believe in mud. That is why I believe in lime and things like that. As Chandra sir said, this is why green buildings are needed in this country. He talked about 3 Ps, talking about economic growth. I am talking about how do you attain economic benefits. I'm putting it in a completely different way. I'm not talking about profit. I'm not talking about profit per se, but I'm talking about economic benefits by increasing employees' comfort levels. If you are put in a nice situation, you obviously will work harder. If you are put in a chula kind of a situation where the heat is too much, you won't feel like working. You'll be sweating all the time. Trivandrum, talk about 90% humidity, you'll be sweating like hell. And you want a comfortable situation. So green technologies is all about economic benefits also. I don't want to look at the other things, but it concerns with public health. It's very critical. This is where probably the air conditioning people will have to give me an explanation how I can quell my own fears and apprehensions about some of the air conditioning practice in prevalent now. This is a definition that is before you. And why I am very concerned about, why you should discuss about, when you talk about emerging cities, why you should discuss it. You are all engineers, like me. I'm an architect basically, but I will style myself as an engineer. And we are responsible for the built environment of this country. We are responsible for the built environment of this planet. Let me take a universal view. Not only this country, this planet. We build the built environment, isn't it? We are the creators. Engineers are the creators. Not the doctors, not the teachers. Engineers create the built environment. And civil engineers, architects, we have to take a lot of blame because we are primarily responsible. I have to bow my head in shame because we are primarily responsible for the climate change in this country. Can you believe it? Can you believe that is the wrong practice in building construction, which is primarily, not anything else. You talk about ozone depletion, you talk about cutting down of trees. It is the unhealthy, unsustainable practice in building construction, which is actually aggravating the whole issue of climate change. We together, the engineers, who are responsible for the built-up world, built-up environment, we are primarily responsible for this challenge. And that is why, and this is exactly why we should think about harnessing our energies, our concerns for a better world, looking at sustainability in a very critical dimension. Unless we address this dimension, it's going to be very, very bad for us. Look at the construction business. I don't want to go into the details, but this construction impacts 32% of the total energy produced in this country is being used in there are 2 phases, post-construction, pre-construction. In the pre-construction phase, 32% of the total energy produced in this country is being used in the pre-construction phase of a building. Can you believe it? 22% of fresh water. Water everywhere, but not a drop to drink. Situation where Kerala is in. All the 44 rivers, we have only 44 rivers. We have only 44 rivers in this state. And all the 44 rivers are drying. All the 44 rivers are on a certain deathbed. We are so water rich. Water everywhere. But it has come to a situation, but there's not a drop to drink now. Not a drop. I still remember when I was a student, when the packaged water was being put in the market, I was wondering whether it would sell. Packaged water, packaged mineral water as they call it. Can it sell? Because it is such a water-rich state. All the rivers around Trivandrum, all full. My own native place, Tiruvalla, Aranmula, they were all full of water. But look at these things. 44 rivers are dying. And 22% of fresh water is being used in the pre-construction phase. I will add to that. I mean, I don't want to go into the building operation impacts also. I mean, it's half of the greenhouse gases, which is primarily responsible for the climate change, carbon dioxide emissions. We are not looking at the statistics. We don't learn from them. But these statistics really, pull you. You should really, have a kind of a revolting feeling in you, because something very critical. I was talking about water. Let me put a figure before you. I don't know, people of my age, I'm not able to comprehend the figures. When, Nidhi was unearthed from Padmanabha Swami temple, initial days they were talking about 1 crore, then it became 10 crores, third day it became 100 crores, fourth day it became 1,000 crores, fifth day it became 10,000 crores, then it became 100,000 crores, then it became 1,000, and then we talked about 1 lakh crores. I mean, a figure that went beyond your comprehension. I stopped reading the newspaper because I couldn't comprehend that figure. 1 lakh crore worth nidhis under this temple. Usually away. In India, all my dear delegates, in India, 5 billion liters, 5 billion, not million, 5 billion liters a day is being used in India to flush out our dirt from the toilets, from our commodes. 5 billion liters a day of potable water, very important, potable water is being used in our toilets to flush out our dirt. Water everywhere, not a drop to drink. We are in such a terrible situation. Unless we actually react to that, do something about water conservation of resources, we are in for a lot of problems. Let me also dwell a little bit. I mean, I'm not an expert in this. You are probably much more capable, much more qualified than to talk about this. I believe, as an activist, let me tell you that, as an activist, not really as a scientist, I believe that indoor air quality is badly violated in India. When I say in India, you must have seen the outside scenes in Delhi a few days back, 2 days back. You're talking about a kind of fog falling on the entire population. You can't see each other, not because of fog or mist or something, because of pollution clouds that are actually descending on pollution clouds that are descending in the city interiors of New Delhi. Pollution is there. And we tend to believe that outside air is more polluted than indoor air. Let me make a statement. You can rip me open for that. Maybe it's out of my ignorance. I make a statement that indoor air, the quality of indoor air quality is 100 times. I make a statement. Is 100 times more polluted than the outside air. It's 100 times more polluted than the outside air. We don't see that. Outside, when a ray of sun falls, we see the particles floating in the air, and we tend to believe that's more polluted. Let me make this statement. Indoor air quality is highly violated, badly compromised. Can I use those words together? Badly compromised in India, especially in air-conditioned atmosphere. When I say air-conditioned, all these carpets, they breed tens of thousands of millions of these small organisms, which can be very detrimental to human health. I just make a statement. I'll be very happy if you could react to that. And 90% of life, this is very critical, 90% of the life we actually spend it indoors. either in the office or the home. We don't walk outside. 10% of the time, 10% of a lifetime, we are outside. But 90% of the lifetime, you are indoors. And all these things, if you really talk about sustainability, if you talk about green concerns, you talk about energy conservation, you talk about water management, you talk about wastewater management, you talk about waste management, you talk about indoor air quality and things like that. And how this can be translated, I will not go at length with this because this little too technical. It's about my technology, these things and things like that. But let me tell you, let me make some statements. Then when you talk about sustainable technology, you don't talk about, it starts from the design part. It starts with the design part, right from looking at the site, to the design, to the execution part. People think that it's only about technologies. It's not about technologies, my dear friend. It's not about technologies. It's also about selection of materials. It's also about site analysis. It's also about looking at a lot of things that are very critical for design. And we have such a lot of, I don't want to go into the details again, many of design options before us, many of technology options. I'm just talking about walling. Look at this thing. Look at all these things. And out of which, I do a lot of rat trap bonding. I'll just talk about that for a minute. Why I say rat trap, it's actually a cavity wall construction. Let me make some statements. Let me open again. It is as strong, as durable, and as long-lasting. I made 3 comments. As durable, as long-lasting, and as strong like any other conventional wall. What is the benefit that you get? You get an insulating wall. Because I put bricks on edges, I get a cavity in between. Same kind of this thing. I get a cavity in between, I get an insulating wall. Nothing very special about it. Any mason can do it. I get an insulating wall. I'm not compromising on the strength. They have validated, it's not me, National Building Research Institute in Roorkee. They have validated this technology. They said, after having all these structural analysis, they said this is as strong, as durable, as long-lasting. It's not me. We have gone through scientific validations. And all these technologies are there for us for grabs. I'm looking at rat trap because I'm not talking about other things because some of it is all talk about concrete. Why I am against concrete is because one thing. Concrete means steel and cement. Steel and cement, I actually call them, you may have a difference of opinion, I call them anti-social materials. Why I call them anti-social materials? Because they eat up a lot of energy for the production processes. For the production process, it's an obsolete process. It's a shame for us. 100 years down the lane, cement came to Trivandrum in 1921. Believe me, cement in the packaged form came to Trivandrum in 1922. It's almost 97. We are getting a 98th year now when cement actually came to Kerala. All the buildings that you see around, VJT Hall, Public Library, LMS Church, St. Joseph's Church, and the rest of the University College, they were not built in cement per se. They were built in cementatious material, which is something else, surki, lime, and the rest of it. Binding materials, the rest of it. The cementatious material, not cement. Cement in packaged form came to this city only in 1921, which means all the buildings that were built, strong buildings that are around, they were not built in cement. Why I am against cement is because the production process is still obsolete. The old, you must have seen Shankar Cement, all those kilns that where they make the cement. The old furnaces where they make the steel. They still use obsolete, outdated technologies that eat up a lot of energy. The production process is so energy intensive, so bloody energy intensive. So that is why I am trying to wean away, looking at alternate material. That's exactly why I am trying to promote local materials like mud, lime, etc., etc. And also, just for none of you, I think, is civil engineer. Let me also make a statement, very provocative statement. Lime and cement are basically the same material, packaged differently. Some chemical, this thing is different, but it's basically the same components. The components are the same, lime and cement. And lime, in many structural applications, they are better than cement. And Kerala, we say it with such such pride. Kerala has the richest lime deposit in the world. Did you hear that? Kerala has the richest lime deposit in the world. The most beautiful. You can't use double superlatives. But let me tell you that the most usable, buildable lime is there in the bed of Vembanad Lake. 15 feet of most beautiful, buildable lime. There are no takers. No takers, so we don't use it. Technology is for the roofing. The critical element when you talk about sustainability is to limit. We don't have many options now. To limit, optimize, very critical, optimize the use of steel and cement so that we can go in for better comfort, better cost efficiency and things like that. These are, I'm showcasing many of options that people, everything pertains to sustainability, because when you talk about ferrocement, have you ever seen a ferrocement wall? Ferrocement wall is hardly half an inch, 3/4 an inch, 1 inch thick wall. 1 inch thick wall. What is the thickness of an ordinary wall? Ordinary wall is 9 inches. Ferrocement wall is 1 inch. 1 inch thick ferrocement wall. That means there is some conservation of material, isn't it? Some conservation. You don't have to use that much of steel, that much of this thing. It serves the purpose. It's as strong, as durable. So wherever there's a conservation, a kind of saving, you should always look at these kind of things. And this is what Ratra bond is all about. Very simple. It's cost is less, insulation is less, better aesthetics, equal strength. This is what I use for all my degree. 100,000 buildings that I've built. They have all used this kind of material. Filler slab it is called. Why filler slab? Filler is a waste material that we get. Actually, in my own house, which I recently completed, there was a little small primary school in Modon Mughal. The local people, they said, it's style, it's not looking good. A lot of moss on that. It's not looking beautiful. The present day generation, new people coming into the school, they used to have colorful roofs. So they took off all the roofs and they took some colorful sheets, tin sheets. Very antique kind of a thing, tin sheets, which are not good for health at all. Asbestos sheet. Asbestos is cancer. And everywhere in the world, it is everywhere. Wherever else in the world, it is actually banned. We are still using it for school buildings. They come in. Now, a combination, asbestos cement sheet. Nobody talks about asbestos. They talk about AC sheets. So you don't know what the sheet is all about. Half of it is asbestos. Nobody lives more than 35 years. I'm telling you. Whoever works in the asbestos mine, they fail to attain a lifespan of 35 years. And we're still there in our building vocabulary. We are still using this asbestos. Very bad for the school children. So my own Modern Mughal LP school, they started putting this thing and they put the tiles on the road. I gleefully took it and that formed the part of my own filler slab concrete. And terracotta flooring. Why I should talk about terracotta flooring? We are talking about new super duper technology solutions. Why should I go back to terracotta tile? Let me make a statement. This is the most healthiest, double superlatives again. The only health floor a man has actually discovered. The only healthy floor. I make a statement, only healthy floor. And there are several examples for this. If you actually start sleeping on a marble floor without mattresses, if you just, sleep on a hard floor like granite or marble, I'm sure none of you, except young friends sitting out there, none of you will be able to get up next day. You'll have a lot of muscle cramps, a lot of muscular pains. Start sleeping on my terracotta floors. You will not only get back rejuvenated, refreshed, you'll have a nice feeling, raring to go. Not only, it's a local material. We don't want it. It's cost effective, it's eco-sensitive, it's energy efficient, and the rest of it. Why I should use rubber wood? Very simple reason. Recycling a material. Rubber wood is, you see, after you take out the latex, you slaughter it. I'm taking it back to the vocabulary. Having some technology interventions, I take the softness out of it by injecting it with some chemicals, and I make it, it's a waste material otherwise. You use it for packaged materials. I'm now showcasing it as a mainstream building material. And why I use mud is because of all these things. Availability is mud everywhere. It's a no-cost material. It's not a low-cost material. It's a no-cost material because you can take it from the ground, build it. It doesn't need people from the from outside the state, outside the country, to teach us about the local skills. Aesthetics, beautiful, intoxicating. Color, texture, smell, intoxicating, and enough strength. And these are, personal, responses to that. Can bamboo be mainstreamed as a basic building material? In many ways, I'm doing that, and I don't want to dwell time on that, but this is all our journey towards what we call a sustainable technology. That's a mud house. Believe me, that's a mud house built for our famous music composer called Jayachandran, completely mud. And this is where he uses this. These are interiors of my own office, 6-storied building, I told you, completely built in mud and things like that. I will actually stop here now. You just read through this. I don't want to go into that. There are no short-term solutions, my dear friends. When you look at sustainability, there are no short-term solutions. We have to look at a longer way ahead. And unless we do it, unless we conserve the earth for our coming generations, it's going to be badly mutilated. Let me come back to the basic premise from where I started. Architecture, I was taught when I was very young, first year in the college, I was taught architecture is actually designing, conserving space for human comfort. That's the basic definition that was taught to us. Now I feel that space is being violated. I'm very concerned about it. My little interventions in choosing the materials, having the sustainability concerns, talk about water management, energy management, talk about waste management, talk about all these things. I am trying to keep the battle on. It's always a battleground. Very few people believe in that. And I have gone through bloody experience. When I said bloody experience, I literally shed my own blood to sustain these technologies and sustain this thing. But I'm sure that having traveled such a long distance, this is here to stay. And I still believe, and I'm increasingly getting convinced that this is the only way ahead for especially countries like India. Sustainability, sustainable architecture, cost-effective, eco-sensitive architecture, energy-efficient architecture is the only way out. We have lost all the other choices. That's the only way forward. With those words, thank you very much for your kind listening. Thank you very much.
Shankar has the courage to say in front of the engineers and technicians of air conditioning. How do you react to that question? Your suggestions, your criticism, he is very happy to answer that. That's why he has provoked us with a number of questions. Please.
As I am associated with healthcare aspects, I would endorse Padma Shri Shankar Saab's view. Because recently Energy Management Center did a inspection of the Medical College facility for the operation theatres. It is indoor air circulation. And whoever went in, like the first invaders into the pyramids and Padmanabha Swami temple, all of them died. They were all sick. Healthy people going in to check those hospital environment in the surgical theatres, they were all sick, falling sick. And all the patients are supposed to be treated very well in the stringent, extremely sterile conditions. This is what is happening even in the controlled environment in a surgical theatre. So I fully endorse whatever he said.
This is something that even architects don't take care. So you have to see it as a part of the whole scenario. There are so many design interventions. Let us not talk about the indoor air quality alone. This also gets violated because of some wrong design details, especially I also work in healthcare solutions in a big way. And that's why, in healthcare situations, especially he's talking about the air quality of the indoor air quality of the surgical, places where operations happen. You cannot have actually any sharp corner. You talk about the corner, the flooring to the wall, that sharp corner, you shouldn't have it. You should always have it as this thing. You shouldn't have one space where dust could actually settle. That is the whole, this thing is, isn't it? Wherever you design operation theatres, wherever, you shouldn't have any horizontal surfaces, horizontal surfaces. I actually, he's talking about air quality. You'll be surprised how simply, with very simple interventions, how do I manage these kind of things? I mean, most of the houses, you won't find horizontal bars on, in my windows. I don't go in horizontal grills. Most of it is always vertical. Why I say vertical is because dust don't get collected in a vertical road. Very simple. If you have horizontal roads, you'll have to spend days together in cleaning the horizontal surface. Wherever there's a horizontal surface, dust will start settling, and that will again violate the atmospheric pollution. So these are all very simple solutions. And where did I get the idea from? The traditional idioms of architecture. We never had horizontal. If you look at our own mother's places, our ancestral homes, we never had horizontal bars. You look at it and tell me, we always had vertical bars. Some people feel that you feel caged, because vertical bars are always, connected with, associated with some images that we get from the jails and things like that, cages. But it's the horizontal, this thing, which actually doesn't collect in the dust because, it's vertical in this thing, things like that. Thank you for the invitation.
Sir, I lived in Mumbai for a very long period, 8-9 years. So that outside air was so polluted, most of the doctors suggest that you close all your windows. So I started doing that. I started using an air conditioner. I felt much better because air conditioners have a filter which at least removes the dust particles. So your argument holds true for rural areas. Does it hold true for cities? And in most of the cities, especially in Kerala, people are burning all solid waste. Outside air is so polluted. So if we take little bit precautions, I think we'll be able to make the indoor air quality better.
It's my concern about the moisture management in the wall structures in India. You go to see these new luxury houses that costs like 20-30 crore rupees, and all the walls are already growing mold because they didn't know how to keep the moisture outside from the space. And especially now when we start to air condition, we seal the buildings, it's going to be, after the particulate pollution, it's going to be the next big national health crisis because people get ill due to the mold. So how would we first make people to understand that mold doesn't belong to the indoor environment? And secondly, how could we get the architects and builders to build the houses that has the hollow score wall that gets the inner wall dry or something else? That you can't just put the concrete against the soil and all the water comes in.
He was actually mentioning about the outside air quality of Trivandrum. He was living in Mumbai for a few years after he came back to Trivandrum. And he's seeing a lot of smoke happening, a lot of waste being burnt, and obviously a lot of poisonous gases being emitted in this thing. And he was asking me, how could you call the outside air much more healthier than the indoor air? I endorse you this thing that outside air is getting polluted. There's no doubt about that. By burning plastic, we are releasing carcinogenic gases into the air, which is very, very detrimental. It's bad for your health, causes cancer. I do agree with all those things, It's us who is violating this thing. But when I come to interiors, when I come to this contrived interiors, I'm using that word very carefully, contrived interiors. I'm not totally talking about air-conditioned spaces. I'm talking about, in Kerala, one funny thing that is happening, I'm working elsewhere also. I don't know where you are from. I'm working across. I'm in Sweden. I teach in some Scandinavian countries where it's a completely different ball game. Here, our sun and our wind, they're so good. You invite them in. You're talking about air particulates. That partially will answer your apprehensions also. You see, there is no other way, no other better way than to get the wind into our house. That is what in architectural language we call as cross ventilation. In Kerala, unlike in some of the cold countries, Kerala, we don't have such harsh summers, we don't have such harsh sun. If you open the window, wind will come in. The only thing is that the orientation of building is very critical. We have a windward side and we have a leeward side. Which is the windward side? We get our winds. I'm talking about Kerala specific solutions where we get the westerlies. We get the western side of the sea. See, we get the westerlies. If we have windows opening to the westerlies, the predominant wind direction is from the west. We open the windows on the western side, air will flow in. I'm telling you, air will come in if there is an opening on the opposite side. That is the beauty of cross ventilation. If you have windows on opposite sides, air will naturally come in and blow off all the particulates, all the dust, all the poisonous things in the air. Air is a huge equalizer, let me tell you that. Once you get the air in, humidity, you're talking about high humidity. Humidity, we are tuned to that because we are on the seaside. Humidity doesn't really affect us, I'm telling you. I don't know whether you're from a landlocked country, but for us, even 80% humidity doesn't affect our health. I'm telling you, 80% humidity doesn't affect our health because we are tuned to these tropical living conditions. It doesn't help our head. But if you actually manipulate on the humidity, this thing, that is what is happening in air conditioning, this thing, then you start sneezing, then you start having all these coughs, all these infections coming in. And I think it's not only my story, it's your story too. So this is my reflection of that. I mean, one is ensure cross ventilation in a nice way so that all the dust, these things, particles get blown away. If we can have openings on both sides, this is why in architecture when I design things, I will have two sides open to the outside, this thing. I will have every room, even the kitchen, I'll have two sides of this thing opening to the outside. So that I can, even in toilets. Toilets is a huge place where it needs design interventions. The floor, we have a different kind of a toilet habit. I mean, let me tell you that. We don't segregate between the wet area and the dry area. Our floor is always wet. Kitchen, we use a lot of water. So those areas, kitchen and toilets are always wet. How do you address this issue? We can't change our cooking habits. We can't change our toilet habits. By little design interventions, we can do it. Segregate into wet areas and dry areas. Put the wash basin and the commode in the dry area, whereas the bath area, where we take bath, is segregate a little bit. Probably a floor difference, 1 inch difference in the floor can actually create wonders in managing such humidity and things like that. And I never have ventilators. I have small windows for the toilets. Because once I open the windows, air will come in and that itself will dry the wetness. And that is how, through very simple interventions, I am trying to address these kind of issues and apprehensions.
In our old traditional houses, we used to have ventilation coming from behind area where we have open space. And then in the front, there is a narrow space where the tunneling effect and all used to come. I think those kind of things are all gone. Exactly. We have a veranda area where... Exactly, sir. I mean, I use actually... well is there inside the house. So all those kind of concepts are maybe forgotten.
Sir, I mean, I'm doing some works in Maharashtra and places like Gujarat and Maharashtra, where you should see the same principles of refrigeration. The same principles of refrigeration they manage earth, They have a kind of funnel kind of a structure that goes through the walls, along the walls, and you actually get, during harsh summers, you get such a pleasant, such an acceptable kind of a living interior. So this is how probably people were looking at it. The same principle of refrigeration and air conditioning.
Traditional houses in Trivandrum, we have the lime mortar that is being used, which is 75 years old, and even it stands today.
So that is what. Let me conclude this by telling you that we have to probably walk a bit backwards and look at our traditional idioms and traditional knowledge, and then imbibe the spirit, imbibe the energies, so that together, let me tell that with such passion, together can we look at a sustainable way Thank you very much.
To present the memento as a token of love and affection to Padma Shri Gopalan Nair Shankar, I invite Founder President of ISHRAE Trivandrum Subchapter, Shri Keshava Pillai Ganeshan, to the dais.